This is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Monday, December 6th. Let's hop in here. So, we very possibly will never see any kind of little hitch up or disconnects again. Although, the chances of that happening are kind of low, considering how I've always been streaming through the wired part of my router and never through the wireless. But after months and months of just frustration and trying to tweak settings and trying to get whatever the problem was, where just occasionally I'd get interference and lose connection on the wireless, I just said F it at a certain point. As like the sunk cost fallacy only goes so far until you just have to say, let's just factory reset the settings. And so that's what I did, is I factory reset all the Wi-Fi settings, then I copy and pasted in all the other important settings from what is probably about 12 different tabs on my router, but leaving all the Wi-Fi stuff just by default. And in fairness, it's about as fast as possible. It's doing everything at a bare minimum frequency of 20 megahertz, channel width of 20 megahertz, the smallest you possibly could do. On the 2.4 gigahertz, it's getting about 25 megabits per second, when I've easily gotten it up to 80-90 megabits per second before. But with speed, clearly there's at least a danger of instability. And then on the 5 gigahertz, I'm just leaving that alone too, and that's getting about 100 megabits per second when I had that up to 370 megabits per second, which is the max of my new internet service provider. So more than likely, doing a speed test with a faster internet, if such a thing was possible, would have actually resulted in even higher numbers than 350. The actual max rate is 750. You take about 80% of that, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was closer to that. Now, inherently part of the problem, though, is I was looking for a way to... let's open a pack first. I was looking for a way, without using QoS, which has always been a nightmare and never really worked for me. I was looking for a way to limit each individual connection to a smaller amount. I was looking to try to get everybody to only use about 50 megabits per second, which is, well, it's not a huge amount. It's more than enough. Even 25 is more than enough. Like the Tableau video streamer I have over there, DVR, I have it set to 3 megabits per second. So if there's 3 megabits coming up and 3 megabits coming down, then you would only literally need 6 megabit connections for any device. So you're still getting every second potentially 14 megabits extra. So yeah, that is, let's do this in the right order here. That's where I'm at, and for a day and a half, of which on Sunday, for the accountability section, I have to admit, I turned up my heater too much and slept most of the day away. Sometimes it just gets really comfy and warm, and then all of a sudden I go into hibernating mode. So yeah, with the default settings so far, I have not had a single disconnect, and there were specifically points when I would take my phone in certain spots of my house, and you were fairly consistently always losing connection at those spots, and that's not happened yet. So for steady but slow speed, I will take that, and I will live with that, and hopefully that is the last bit of tweaking that I need to do on my router anytime soon. Like, I honestly think I probably could change the channel width up to 80 megahertz instead of 20 megahertz for the 5 gigahertz, which is actually the standard speed that it's supposed to be at. But I'm not willing to touch it. In fact, weirdly, setting it back to the default settings, for my router, there was always this third Wi-Fi router that didn't ever seem like it actually worked, and it seemed like it was just totally broken. But with the default settings, it actually does work. So I don't know what it's really doing, but by default it was turned on, so I just left it on. Which that certainly is interesting.
Walter, Ranger of the Forest, at your service.
Sorry, I'm chewing on ice right now. It was kind of a good weekend to not do anything because I was still trying to rest my eyes, which I think are getting better. But we'll see 4 hours into the stream, or 3 hours into the stream, if that stays the same. There are 2 devices I have identified that try to just be their own access points on whatever frequency I'm on. I thought for a brief second that somebody was literally trying to just do a de-authentication or an interference attack, but no, it's actually just 2 badly programmed devices that I own that when they're not connected to the internet, or even when they are connected to the internet, it seems like they try to be on the same frequency and act as an access point. Which is weird. I almost wonder if that is something that is built into like the AirPod, Airstream standard, something like that, where that's how you can just like directly stream on things like that. What I should do is turn that off as a feature, since I don't even have any Apple devices to start with, and see if that fixes it.
Check out my fancy footwork.
Like, it is nice to have those features, but if the trade-off of having that feature is that it is just constantly acting as an access point and taking up precious bandwidth over the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, because everything is set to the 20 megahertz small channels that theoretically are supposed to make cell phones and things like that use a little less battery, because the Wi-Fi radio would use a little less power. In practical application, I don't think there's really much of a noticeable difference on my Samsung S7, which is a fairly old device. So I'm sure that was probably true for at least a few of older devices, but has since stopped becoming true.
You have summoned the blade of purgation here.
As for the actual work I did over the weekend, I was debugging my macro programming to schedule videos, and through the process I did schedule, but not 100% correctly schedule, not all of Batman Arkham City. I had to give up on changing the YouTube title. That is just manual now, but I was able to debug it to get in screens and all the other data to be reused and implemented. The next step would be, once I get the whole thing fixed, the next step would be to try and get cards implemented for whatever little cards are worth, which honestly may not really be that much.
You have summoned the blade of purgation here.
And
Scatter like the blossom.
if I can get cards to work,
Try and break
this
blade.
next step after that would be to get custom thumbnails to also be in the same macro, which might be a little bit more difficult, certainly, but not crazy difficult. And if I am going to get custom thumbnails uploaded, then I would have to work with the idea of going back to that other thought of a project that I had, using OBS and Image Magic to make custom thumbnails. But after that, if you've got custom thumbnails, if you've got an end screen, if you've got cards, there is basically nothing else you can even add to a video on YouTube. So,
I'll see you in
yeah, that is working out fine, with the exception that I am still trying to debug the
genuflect before darkness eternal. The truth lurks in the dark.
No dirty tricks.
yeah, I'm still trying to debug the date. Like, I figured out how to get the date to increment and get the date to schedule.
Don't worry,
But
I've got this.
the function to get the date to tell me whether it's Monday, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, for some reason is not working. It's not returning a proper value through the JavaScript. And every suggestion says that this should be a simple 2 short sentences of code, but there's something I've typed that is just not working with it. It's not, either the input is wrong for it, or for some reason the command to return the output is wrong for it. That's really all it could be. But once I get the date to actually be right, then I need to make sure that my code is correct. Part of the thing that sucks here is that it's too complicated in Selenium UI Vision. I specifically choose UI Vision because I think it has a few more functions than other Selenium-based macro programs. But yeah, it's too complicated to do the JavaScript to try and test it like an array, which would be the real thing to do, is to have an array of zeros and ones, and the first zero the first number would indicate Sunday. If it's a 0, then don't put a video on that day. If it's a 1, then do put a video on that day. That gives me the option of potentially changing whether videos just started airing only one day a week, or specific days a week. Like,
100% street and 0% fluff.
But yeah, processing it as an array is just too complicated. The way you have to jump out of one programming language that's very rough in Selenium down to JavaScript, which is a pretty rough programming language in itself, but it's much more mature than Selenium is. Makes it
What fine threads you have.
makes it quite a complicated process.
This'll be over
So I'm trying to write the code to not use an array, which is what I would do by default, and I think is the better move by default.
So our pack is full.
I also saw a YouTube video. We're going to have a brief accountability section here today. There's really nothing else to say about it. I'm working on it, and at the very least, while I am debugging, I am getting videos somewhat accurately scheduled. So there is even a possibility I get all the videos scheduled before I'm done debugging things, and it then becomes a weird issue in which I might forget what I was even working on by the time I have more footage to upload, so I probably need to start playing some games again. Which I need to do that anyways.
So our pact is
but yeah. I was thinking of something else, but I think I've forgotten what the other thing I was thinking about was.
Is merely the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's just flown the coop as it was a thought.
Carry out your mission.
Yeah, we definitely don't have a lot of games or news for this Monday. It is still very much a slower time of year. Which I don't think that's gonna surprise too many people.
Impossible.
Let's play here.
The string is so pricey.
You have summoned the blade of purgation here.
I feel like I did do more over the weekend, but yeah, I'm having bouts of just watching Netflix. Like, there's this like Chocolate School Netflix series I watched and found
This will be over quick.
slightly interesting for a brief time, and then got bored and didn't make it all the way through. I tried to watch the new Annie live and got bored after an hour into it, of a 3-hour live Broadway performance. So I'm being fairly ADD and just not sticking with anything.
And rise.
I feel like there was a whole
Everything was a lie.
series I may have watched on
I'll
Saturday.
see you in purgatory.
Like, I was watching some of that Disenchanted series, and that is just like unfinished and terrible. Like, there is something definitely, if you watch Disenchanted after having watched all of Futurama, that it definitely shows that Matt Groening was only adding, I would say, at maximum a sixth of the jokes in Futurama, and his jokes were kind of the least funny of the jokes. Which arguably, at this point, I don't know how many people even think of Futurama as the comedic show that it was supposed to be, as much as people think of it as a romance story between Fry and Leela, with comedy elements and jokes around it, or yeah.
What fine threads you have.
But Disenchanted, you basically have no romance element at all.
I've got this under control.
You have a few characters that feel like they are definitely cheap clones of previous existing Futurama characters, but they don't go in different ways. They don't barely have any characterization at all. And it once again just doesn't end anywhere. So it's just really a terrible
Show me the limits of your will.
viewing experience. Okay.
Scatter like the blossom.
Lose yourself in this final dance.
Well, I messed up there, I guess.
I can't move.
But yeah, I kind of feel like there was a whole other show I watched on Netflix and have immediately forgotten about.
Setting reflectors.
I wish I could get into the art style of the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure on Netflix, but I just
Like the
never
moon
could.
on the water's surface.
Like, I've heard people sing the praises of it, and arguably maybe if I read the manga instead of tried to watch the animes of it, that would work a little bit better. But it is just like such a out there art style that one look at it is like the max I can take. It's appealing in stills as a thumbnail, but actually considering watching the whole thing, just isn't anywhere close to something I would do.
Sword deserves a pointed response.
My song will slay you.
So I guess my goal this week, unless my eyes start hurting, would be to get back into the habit of recording videos. And I guess that's about as much as I can say for the accountability section, as we're getting closer and closer to Christmas. I imagine I will have less and less that I actually accomplish. With the exception of the video game winter sale, I'm pretty much done with any shopping and didn't really even spend that much for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Didn't really see a lot of good deals. If I had not bought anything during Amazon Prime Day, it would have been a very sparse year as far as purchases in general.
A precious life deserves a precious more jewels, more.
Which could have been a good thing. But I imagine a lot of people are in that situation involuntarily, and they're not happy about that, I'm sure. There was a deal where you could get a Switch in like 12 months of the Switch Online stuff for $2.99, which is probably the best deal you would get, but I still think, personally for me, a used scratched up Switch for $200 even may have a lot more value to me for as little as I'm actually going to play it. Like, the Switch is the first console since the Wii that I haven't bought, that I actually wanted to buy. Wii U was never of any interest. So
our pact is forged.
I mean,
Allow me to bestow a crimson
guess
kiss
this would
melt
work.
under my touch.
You have summoned the blade of purgation.
yeah, I don't know how I'm gonna find free time to even play a Switch at this point, since I've got side projects, some of which are useful, many of which are not.
For the end is near.
I can say the refurbed external hard drive that took me a month to get a replacement for, or over a month, it was like a month and a half. So far, so good. I probably should format it to NTFS with compression, just on principle. But yeah, at the current moment, it seems like it's working. course, I haven't really started to try and put it through its paces either. So as soon as I start to try and transfer a lot of data to it, instead of just having cell phone backups transfer data to it, you may find some real differences there. But I'm almost 100% certain that the problem was a actual physical hardware problem and not anything software-wise I had done to the hard drive, to the original hard drive, to make it break.
Melt under my touch.
Rude.
Should have evolved that, I guess. So hopefully everything is gonna stay that way, and that opens up the door to me taking some extra free time, if I ever have extra free time, to start cleaning up my backup hard drive that is internally installed on my computer, so I actually have successful backups, which I almost never have successful backups because I don't have enough space. Okay. Let's see, what can we do?
A precious life deserves a
And
precious
so our
death.
pact is forged.
More jewels, more.
Okay, so we have a game on Steam here called The Savior from Above. I didn't give any thought actually to making the second program to change these pages. That is something I'm thinking about doing, but it would definitely take a lot of work. Like, it is not going to be a simple thing to take HTML code from like here and then put it here. It's doable, but you're fundamentally doing a transmutation, to use magical speech, of the page. Let's try this again.
Show me the limits of your will.
Evolve gives us a horrible night.
Like the blossom.
Lose yourself in this final dance.
And then this discards 3. We'll get rid of that one. We'll get rid of that one. I'll get rid of that one. Do that one. Do that one.
Frightened. Good.
That one.
Weak.
See if this works. Yeah, so we have a game called The Savior from Above, which it almost looks like it's a pipe dream puzzle game, but then they're calling it a side-scrolling 3D adventure short game, which is just a mix of words and descriptions there. And then it's free, English only, but then there's
Like the moon
donations.
on the water surface.
Yeah, I don't think there really is a game here. I think this is probably closer to vertical slices of different games or tech demos. Almost an asset flip, really, of just like different gameplay mechanics. Yeah, walking around 2D side-scrolling and solving puzzles is not objectionable, but then having also a 3D element at some point, and then earlier on there was a space flying element. I mean, that's just way too much for one game, one small game, one game that's not even charging money. Here we have a game called Alma, interactive narrative that captures the tension of work-life balance for healthcare workers. Okay. Not to be confused with the Alma Ghost Girl from the Fear series. So basically, it's a visual novel. $1.99 English, allegedly full audio, although I seriously doubt that since we're seeing text here. I'll give it a follow, but
Even if I'm scrap,
I feel like this is a great example of something that is started off from the perspective of let's be preachy, and honestly, and maybe this is just my personal experience, but I'll put it out there as my personal experience. I've found that I've known a higher than average number of nurses that are self-entitled and think they do a lot of work and don't really do any more work than anybody else, any other hardworking person out there. I just have to put that out there. Like, doctors, at least in general, know they don't work hard and that they get overpaid, and at least they can that they go from the idea of well, yeah, we're golfing on Saturdays and barely spending 5 minutes with most patients. But yeah. But that is not to say nurses and doctors don't do good things. I think both often are true. They both do good work, but a lot of times they overvalue themselves and have bad attitudes, for lack of a better term. And yeah, it's preachy, to say the least.
Lots of bones, but make it fashion.
Having put my own personal experience aside, this is really a great example of a game where you have a character that isn't, or a character archetype that really isn't used that much in games and should be used more in games. That of a medical care worker, a nurse, a doctor. Like, very rarely before the first person shooting starts is somebody a nurse or a doctor. You maybe get a healer in fantasy games sometimes, but then they stay as healers, and their gameplay mechanic is different than every other gameplay mechanic, or a medic in a military game. But they once again, their gameplay mechanic is often completely different from everybody else.
a precious life deserves
It
a
would
precious death. More jewels, more.
make a lot more sense for there to be more kind of falling down, like the movie Falling Down type scenarios, where you are you're playing as a nurse, you're playing as a doctor, you're playing as something that isn't just a military person who already knows how to hunt. You're not playing as a cop or a police officer or a survivalist or something. It would make better sense in storytelling if you had more characters like that. Then the zombie apocalypse happens. Then the war breaks out. Then you have to survive a lot more. Like, in The Last of Us 1, what was Joel? Like, as someone who hasn't played it, I can't tell you, but I honestly don't know if they ever said what he did before the apocalypse happened at all. in Uncharted, the Drake is a fortune hunter and a thief. So he was already in the mindset and the style of shooting a lot of people. In the Tomb Raider series, Lara Croft is a Tomb Raider archaeologist hunter, always already in the mindset of shooting, running, and gunning, because in particularly the Tomb Raider universe, being an archaeologist is something that involves a lot of shooting.
That was delightful.
But like very rarely do you start off as anything other than that shorthand of you've already been military trained, which then makes it compoundingly stupid when they give you a tutorial mode and they're teaching you how to shoot a gun for the first time. Yeah, it just often doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, I would much prefer to play as characters who had other careers and got forced into it. Even in the Walking Dead Telltale series, like the main guy was a history professor who had been arrested for murder. So he had either, depending on what you said, murdered his wife's lover or been framed for murdering his wife's lover. They leave it very ambiguous. But I don't think they really spend too much time talking about any of the other characters in the Walking Dead Telltale series as far as what their jobs are. And even if they had, they killed off all the characters in such a fast pace that it didn't really even matter what people's jobs were. And certainly that wouldn't have applied to the last season of The Walking Dead, when it was just a bunch of kids. Like the kids in that last season had more backstory than most of the adults in the previous seasons.
My fate lies at the edge of a blade.
Something like Dying Light definitely could have a case where you could be a nurse and start with that skill set. Arguably there should be something like a Dungeons and Dragons manual that has different character classes for normal everyday jobs and career paths and skill sets that people could lean on more when creating characters. Dead Island, at a certain level, gave some backstory to each of the different characters you could play as. And in Dead Island, it was just a bunch of people vacationing on an island when the zombie apocalypse happened. But yeah, just making a visual novel. My main point here, though, is making a visual novel and talking and preaching about how somebody's job is so hard does not make a good interactive video game. It really doesn't. And in a lot of ways, I've said this many times, any game that simulates a real-world job tends to be pretty bad. Like, I don't want to simulate a real-world job too much. And I really wouldn't want to simulate a nurse's job, because nurses' jobs very often are not very visually appealing, to say the least. They're not safe for life, not safe for work type. Let's clean these oozing wounds and let's change these adult diaper stuff. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says Grid Legends release date, gameplay, and new details have been revealed. It's coming in February of 2022. Do we have a specific date? February 25th. Okay. Activision will not be part of the Game Awards, Jeff Keighley says. Beyond its award nominations, the company will not feature due to ongoing harassment controversy. So in a lot of ways, this is probably not going far enough for a lot of people. I would expect that some people should say straight up Activision Blizzard should have not even been nominated for creating a game. And that is something I think they probably next year need to think about and think how they would prefer to handle this scenario. Because on one case, it's probably too late to say as a criteria of being nominated your company has to meet certain minimum worker standards, worker treatment standards, minimum moral standards, like a morals clause, basically, to win an award or be nominated. And that would probably eliminate a decent amount of the low effort garbage game developers out there anyways, but they make bad games, so they wouldn't be nominated anyways. At a certain level though, if you also go down this route and you create a morals clause for the Game Awards, then you might very well end up excluding anything from EA, which is fine because EA is unlikely to win an award anyways, but then you might also exclude a lot from Ubisoft, depending on whether or not you believe Ubisoft. I mean, you could certainly make a minimum requirement so minimum that it says you must not be actively under investigation by the government, but even that would not be it. Generally, I think they probably wouldn't want to make a hard set rule and instead just say, well, next year we know no Activision Blizzard games will get nominations anyways. And so they can really just ignore this problem for this year. That would be my suspicion as to the best way to play it. Because they don't want to come off as being siding one side or the other. And I don't think the Game Awards feels like it could probably afford to lose Activision Blizzard forever. Video game companies, particularly well known for being petty and blacklisting people for pretty much ever.
Check out my fancy footwork. Get ready to fly. No, the blueprints.
Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Hellblade 2 is likely to feature at the Game Awards, it's claimed. Suna's Saga was initially revealed in the 2019 at the 2019 show. This would be Suna's Saga Hellblade 2. And yeah, that's definitely not a journey I would really want to go on. And I think, really, if we were to think things really through, the one selling point about Hellblade was that it looked really good in 2019. I wouldn't be surprised if it actually doesn't look that good by the time it gets released completely. And I really have to wonder if there's anything more to be done or said as far as that story, since it was just a crazy person hallucinating, and that's really the only way to see it. It's like, does this person just go deeper and deeper into insanity? Like, because this trailer implies that they're going to have her control an army of the dead and avenge her, her village that was pillaged by Vikings. But I would really have to question how much actual gameplay is there. And one thing I will definitely point out is one of the things I kind of hated with Hellblade 1 is that there was a lot of zooming in on the faces of the 2 or 3 main characters, with just a lot of blurriness, and frankly it wasn't even blurriness, there was a lot of darkness in the background, just pitch blackness in the background, as if it had all been filmed in a bad green screen that was poorly lit, and it had odd Dutch angles, so it wasn't even lined up. So I'll applaud them for at least lining this up and not having weird Dutch angles, but the filmography of it is not, it's not good. It feels like it's a pathetic attempt at trying to be trying to be intense and not really knowing how to do it. Moving on, the LA Lakers are selling a custom Halo Xbox bundle and it's already being scalped. Whatever. I think you'd be a sucker to buy that in any way. Netflix is teasing its live-action Resident Evil series with its first clips. Now, arguably, how much is going to be live action in a zombie show? Like, you look at this dog, and this, to me, looks like it is probably at least 65% CGI. Like, unless you're telling me that this is actually a model that somebody made, or a puppet that somebody made, and that they're doing practical effects for a zombie dog. Which, yeah, I would question that heavily. Yeah. Just by the looks of the cuts, this looks like it is going to be sillier than it probably should and not take it very seriously. I did not like the Resident Evil animated series for the half an episode I watched. But yeah, this looks like there's going to be a lot more talking and a lot more interacting with people and a lot more just being chased by individual zombies instead of going with a higher action series like the previous Resident Evil series. And I guess that is something to applaud, that you would be ambitious to do something different and not just have another high action Resident Evil series redoing the previous live action Resident Evil series that was all action. I will also say this looks like they have tried a lot harder to stick to the main real story of the games instead of just making things up as they go along. But yeah, the fact that the girl's hair looks so well done up, I think, is an indication that you're not really going to see them get dirty and bloody, and this is going to be a very ungory experience. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you fight 2 or 3 dogs in the entire series. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up telling most of the entire first 5 movies. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they tell most of the story from the entire 5 movies in one season and then never get a sequel, because you practically would need to do that if you're not going to go in a different direction. Swordcraft and Bloodcraft still, we didn't get a single victory in that arena play, which is not super surprising. Let's try some swordcraft. Apparently, Ubisoft's game The Division and Beyond and Good and Evil, as well as an Assassin's Creed series, are also in the works. It is, I think, probably something you would overlook. Apparently this is a movie theater thing, too. So Netflix is producing it, but it's coming to movies.
To arms! There's a battle underway!
Right.
Prepare for defeat.
I think it's worth mentioning, though, that Sony, along with Screen Gems, here, a Sony company, are the first two names you see as far as production companies. So when Sony may be failing miserably to maintain its relationships with Japanese companies, Sony Interactive Entertainment, Sony PlayStation is failing miserably to maintain its relationships with Japanese companies. Clearly, Capcom, the owner of Resident Evil, a Japanese company, still saw it worthwhile to come into an agreement. In fairness, this could have been done half a decade ago or longer, but they went in business with Sony Motion Pictures. So Sony, as a corporation in whole, is, I think, still closer to being seen as a Japanese company than not. That being said, Sony Motion Pictures, as a division of Sony, is still very much a Hollywood company, first and foremost. That they don't make their big bucks certainly making Japanese movies, although I think they probably do have some Japanese movies that they make and release that I would be surprised by. It's different than, say, the makers of the Godzilla movies before the Hollywood takeover of the Godzilla movies. Because that is definitely a Japanese movie production company. I can't even remember the name of it. I want to call it Kawasa or something like that. But I don't know. That being said, getting back to Japanese movie production companies, some of the CGI for Resident Evil, this live action Resident Evil, does look pretty bad. So it does feel a lot like a Japanese live action movie more than anything else. Unfortunately, it does seem to be the trend at the moment that when we have games or animes turned into live action shows, we are creating and filling in a gap of what once was only Japanese live action translations, where it was low budget and it looked awful and it was goofy, and people maybe could overlook that and enjoy it for being a goofy fun, but that seems to be becoming more and more the case. Whereas I would have preferred to see more Tomb Raider style Hollywood movies where there's a lot of budget put into it and a lot of effort put into it, and maybe those still don't make any money. I don't know if any movies make money anymore, but I don't want to see Hollywood going down the route of being low budget, particularly on projects that, let's be frank, very little people care about. I mean, it is definitely more excusable for a Japanese company to be low budget because Japanese movie production companies are literally low budget.
Amusing. I like it. Give me that.
The sunlight is unwelcoming.
But Hollywood really doesn't have that excuse. And certainly on a larger level, there's an argument that I don't think gamers should or really in our heart of hearts do want more video game based movies, because it really is just Hollywood grasping at straws, Hollywood on its last legs before it just falls apart and goes out of business. Like we kind of don't need that kind of
100 droplets in a single stroke.
Let's see.
March on.
Well, we don't need Hollywood companies, movie companies coming in and
I'll see you in purgatory.
just trying to steal from the market share of video games. And as a gamer, I don't have time or interest in watching video game adaptations too often. Now, sure, the Castlevania Netflix series worked fairly well, but it is still in no way a replacement for actually playing Castlevania. And that's about the only series that I could think of where that actually works.
Train harder.
I much prefer the idea of video games based on movies versus the opposite direction. Anyways, moving on. Quake apparently has been given an official Horde mode for the first time. Bethesda Remastered has received a mode and a free update. Which, okay. It's the first time Quake has had a Horde mode in 25-year history. That being said, I'm not sure that Quake is relevant enough to really want to play or try and cover. Even when I tried to cover Doom, I barely covered Doom until I got to the Doom reboot. And that kind of is the line for me, is that the Doom reboot was the first time when any Doom-style shooting game had enough going for itself to work with me. Wait, is there anything we could do? We could wait till next turn. We could play this.
This town eats good folk for breakfast.
We could play this.
This town eats good folk for breakfast.
We could evolve this, which might as well.
One step closer to victory.
I ain't dead yet.
And then we'll just end the turn. Yep. Let's see. The cloud native MMO is no longer just an Xbox exclusive, according to journalists. This is from Video Games Chronicle. The title was once thought to be published by Xbox Game Studio. It's being developed by a Finland-based studio, Mainframe. And apparently it has no title. So really, this is just like ridiculously way too early to be talking about this game at all as far as anything. You don't have a code name, you don't have a title, you don't have a console or exclusivity at this point. That's in question. It seems like there's very little even description of what the game is going to be.
This is where I truly shine.
I'll see you in purgatory.
could have won if he hadn't healed. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Phil Spencer thinks modern day Xbox could have kept Bungie. Which, at this point, that probably would have been a good thing, because from what I'm seeing on Reddit, a lot of people are upset with the way Halo Infinite's monetization and release in general have just been going down. So much so that at a certain point, the Halo Infinite Reddit was just straight up locked due to all the negativity, I guess, which is not probably a legitimate reason to lock a forum. And it once again highlights that there needs to be better moderation or no moderation on Reddit forums. But yeah, I'm not hearing a lot of people sing the praises of Halo Infinite. I've seen a couple of like reviews from Video Games Chronicles that say this, they like it, but I wonder if they're having a very different experience than the average player because they're not really playing online or really playing that much. It definitely feels like Halo Infinite would have been just an absolute disaster had it been released on its original release date, and even now it seems like it's pretty much a disaster. I don't know how you get that far without knowing that there should be more delays, or not the announced date should just be pushed back to a nebulous date.
Silence.
There seems like there's a real management problem here in Halo Infinite's scheduling and release, because like you can't blame the fact that people don't have time to get it done right on anything other than the manager. Because if the people didn't have the skill to get it done right, then that's still the manager's fault, because he's hired and kept those low-level programmers in employment. One of the things I saw a video about is, and I've mentioned this a few times, is I was trained in programming to do functional programming before the idea of classes and object-oriented programming were really a thing. Which probably in part also just highlights that what I was trained in programming was old information, even when it was being taught, and it was probably not industry standard. It does. I saw a YouTube video that makes a claim, and I'll kind of assume that it is somewhat true. It does seem like the industry has finally realized that object-oriented programming is not really that useful and not a good system. Apparently there are other ways of programming, procedural programming and logical programming. I'd have to look into them to even know what that specifically meant. But yeah, there's object-oriented programming is fascinating in how it's trying to improve code by making it more complicated and more isolated, and in practical it never made any sense to me, except for in the case of programming an NPC or a character in a game. At that single instance, yes, having a character be an object, or a character class, an object class, makes sense. But only then, really. Any other practical use of it always felt like, okay, this is somebody who is speaking from a theoretical perspective and isn't really trying to apply it. In this YouTube video, I think it was called Object-Oriented Programming is Bad, and there was a follow-up video. And the follow-up video specifically showed examples that were used by people preaching the virtues of object-oriented programming, and I think the video did a fairly good job of showing why even in those examples that they were not realistic and not helpful. That isn't to say that I think functional programming is the best. I think classes sometimes do have uses, but very rarely. And the general idea of everything should be an object or everything should be a class is ridiculous. In the same way that thinking everything should be a function is ridiculous. And I definitely was taught that everything should be a function, at least to a small extent, and I pushed back on that when I was taught programming also. I was like, if you're going to do something more than once, yes, it should be a function. But if you're, or if you have a large amount of code that makes sense, that you would never look at this code as far as the whole of the code, then it almost makes sense to make a function then too. But anything else is ridiculous, and I definitely was told at least a couple times that every single line should be a function. I wish they had influenced me more or pushed more towards documentation more than programming styles or style guides too. They never cared one bit as far as style guides, as far as the teachers I had, which that was a mistake, and they never really cared about documentation, which if I was going to write a programming book, how to teach programming, which I have had thoughts about doing, the first 2 chapters would be talking about documentation and style guides before you even do a single piece of code. It should be documenting and style guides and understanding how incredibly precise one has to be when programming.
Got a job to do.
But yeah, that was, I guess, one more thing that I watched.
Darn it all!
Die, cream. A fitting end.
Loyalty is ironclad.
Back to video game news. Crash Bandicoot's Toys for Bobs could be hiring for a non-Call of Duty project. The new job listing hints towards a new project, according to Video Games Chronicles. Check that out, I guess. Call of Duty Warzone, just terrible game as far as the reviews on Steam imply. Like, nobody's happy with it at all. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing potential job listings for jobs that won't ever see the light of day because they're going to end up firing everybody and shutting down the place first.
The dawn shines like a beacon of hope.
March on!
Dawn always
We
prevails.
won't give
Dawn
him
is
an inch.
dawn is upon us.
Steel yourself!
Blessed sunrise.
Loyalty is ironclad.
Well, can't evolve, so we'll have to leave it there. See, Halo Infinite's hidden multiplayer modes have been found. The modes include a new tactical variation. What's funny is this looks nothing like Halo. This like samurai outfit. I have no idea what it is.
I'll use the embers to start.
But yeah, there's a whole list here of different modes. We're kind of seeing a reoccurring theme here where a lot of multiplayer games have come out, and people have been unhappy with them.
Are you ready for true combat? Come on now.
Let's do this.
Let's speed things up. Too slow.
That.
Steel
Do
yourself. One
Roll
step
there.
closer to victory. I'm over here.
Get that one. Here's a juicy story, I guess is the wrong word to use. Video Games Chronicle says a PlayStation exec has been fired following pedophile allegations. A PlayStation Network senior vice president was filmed in an amateur pedophilia sting. Okay, caught on film. So that sounds like that is pretty rock solid. The problem here, and this is a thing that's been happening, and maybe it's happening a little bit more nowadays, is that there have been a lot of these amateur groups that have tried to catch pedophiles, and they're doing it for like YouTube clout, or they're doing it in a very poor way. Even the To Catch a Predator series on TV actually has a, from what I hear, pretty low conviction rate because of the way it was just it was implemented. Like, you're spoiling the evidence in a lot of ways. You're coming in to a court case with dirty hands in a lot of cases, in a lot of instances. So when you have this like idea of these amateur groups effectively trying to entrap people and effectively being easily dismissed or broken down in court, there is
So close.
there's just like questionable problems there. And
General, we destroyed them.
So on the one hand, it sounds like the allegations against them are probably true, but everybody's innocent until they get their day in court, and arguably this person may never even be charged with anything. But on the other hand, I wouldn't be surprised if this was actually an amateur pedophilia sting group that actually had a grind to an axe to grind against this person in particular, or didn't even care, and so they've just altered or falsified evidence. And so you have to just kind of leave everything as alleged. Unfortunately, this is not something PlayStation wants anything to do with, so they just are going to fire the person. And while that does hurt the person, the vice president, the senior vice president, you'd think a senior vice president of the PlayStation Network or anything would have a little bit more sway and not just be immediately terminated, but whatever. While that hurts him financially, it actually, because it hurts him financially, opens him up to a civil lawsuit to prove damages now, if you can get past the anti-slap laws through many states, which is seemingly very difficult to get past.
Too slow.
If he can win a civil case saying these people, this amateur YouTube group slandered him, lied about him in any way, if it isn't even 100% factual and truthful, then he can prove damages of his entire salary, I imagine, for many years and sue this group. But what's the good in getting a judgment against a bunch of YouTubers who probably have less than $1,000 to their name, or less than a few thousands of dollars? Like, you're not going to get $100,000 to $1 million out of this group. You can get a judgment for that, certainly, but they'll never have that much money, and then they can just go bankrupt and never pay it anyways, in most cases. And that really is your only recourse. Whether you're guilty or not, the first recourse is you have to accuse the people of lying and sue them. It would have been a much more open and shut case, as it were, if he was caught by the actual police, the FBI, the CIA, an actual authority figure that has some legal requirements to do their due diligence. And one of the things that this exec can claim, certainly, is that he can claim with a reasonable, he can create a reasonable doubt, certainly in a lot of cases, as far as any criminal case or even in a civil case, that he even though this does seem to be like they had a decoy posing as a 15-year-old boy on Grindr. Well, the problem with that is Grindr does not allow 15-year-olds, and it is known that in their terms of agreement that that you are asserting you're over the age of consent. So if somebody puts in their portfolio that they are like 17 years old and the age of consent is 18 on something like Grindr, then you can certainly make the claim that people are just lying about their age on their profile and that they really are past the age of consent. So the fact that they used an app in particular, and such a generic app like Grindr, runs afoul of this sticking. If this was really an effort to put somebody behind bars or protect people, it doesn't really smell like, when these amateur groups do it, it doesn't really smell like they're trying to do anything to benefit society or protect real children anywhere out there. It definitely feels like they are just trying to get YouTube karma points, and inevitably it becomes obvious that the people running these amateur groups are not good people either. That's generally how this boils down. I would assume that the FBI is not really trying to or looking for real offenders on sites like Grindr. I would assume that the real pedophile offenders that the FBI is going after are using servers in countries that are far outside of the United States, not Grindr, which I think is probably based out of California if I was to just assume. I would assume that the real offenders are using a lot better obfuscation technologies and things like that. Certainly what makes another argument for the idea of a internet 2.0 that has a blockchain connected to every image out there, and every image is tracked forever.
One step closer to victory. Harder armor, steel yourself.
And could be potentially scrubbed from the internet permanently.
Loyalty is ironclad.
We may see more from this story. We may not.
My armor's been
Enemy or
pierced.
no, you did good.
Like, even at the bottom of this story, this YouTube channel, People vs. Preds, told Kodaku the reason that they released the video publicly rather than handing it to the police was that the police department doesn't work with cyber groups like us. That's when the internet takes over. So, like, the police department is generally all over the place, and all over the world don't want to work with them, which goes to show something. And that's not even true. There are actual groups that the police does work with. The Center for the Missing and Exploited Children, for instance, very much hand in hand works with the police departments and local law authorities. But in fact, I think it's the Center for Exploited Missing Children that makes the database of hashes of underage images that websites often scan for and search for. And seemingly even Grindr didn't step in and get involved in any way, which, yeah. You'd think Grindr, being a very prominent kind of upfront service, would probably work fairly hard to get rid of adult inappropriate content, illegal content.
Things up. Too slow.
Moving on to what is more video game news, and that barely is video game news. Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker's director apologized for login issues and offers 7 free days. Which, okay, that sounds nice. The DNF Duel Striker play video is now available. I don't have any of the blockers enabled at the moment. This DNF Duel does seem like it is going down the route of a lot of the fighter games, where it is
Let's speed things up. Too slow.
very focused on putting out a trailer for every single character that they're going to release. And the thing that kind of sucks about something like DNF Duel is there is a
Should have been quicker. Should have been quicker.
lot of relevancy as far as there's a lot of relevancy as far as the idea of playing Final Fantasy. I mean, not Final Fantasy, Street Fighter. Whereas DNF Duel and any modern fighting game looks so much better than playing Final Fantasy, I mean Street Fighter 1 or Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 1 in particular, it would be really hard to cover and play. And then you run into the problem of the Street Fighter series effectively having about 10 games, but only 5 of them move the chronological story forward, and even at that, I think the fans really wanted everybody to stay the same as they were in Street Fighter 2. So I could see myself, if I ever get around to playing fighting games, playing something like DNF Duel and going, boy, I love the visuals on this, boy, this plays better, boy, this is way more fun. But I'm gonna have to at least spend a little time playing Street Fighter. And I very possibly won't recognize the nuances and the differences in controlling that like nuances and differences in the control of a fighting game compared to
running is always an option.
The uncharted desert awaits.
just a bad controlling fighting game, I guess.
Hands up.
Oh.
Enemy or no, you did good.
Let's see, here we have a game on Steam called Momo Type, which we may have already talked about this. Looks like a monocolor or two-color visual novel of no real interest. Free, English only. Here we have a game called Break Free, which probably is an asset flip first-person shooter from the looks of it. Yeah, I would say it is. Free to play, single player, English only. Yeah, definitely trying to sell on the sex more than anything. That gimmick, I don't think has ever actually worked. The Conan Exiles was like the first like AA game to actually try to play on that gimmick of just having a character creator and having a character in their underwear and selling a game in part by that reason. Although Conan Exiles eventually added so much content to it that they really stopped selling it that way. Cyberpunk 2077 also tried to sell itself that way in some elements, and that didn't work either. So I don't think we'll see too many people try that again. It's just a bad sales point in general. Like, I think you're pretty much always going to be at odds with your desire. Like, are you that specific in your fetish that you need need to make a character that is 5'3" with blue eyes and blonde hair and a specific hue of tan skin and a 36, 24, 22 sizes? Like, are you really that specific in your fetish that you need that to get you interested in a character? I don't think so. And really, you're going to spend like 2 hours on the custom creator character creation. And that's the old joke, is that there obviously are some people out there that have some kind of defect in their brain, for lack of a better term, that does have them spend hours creating their character that they then never really even see in the game, or they see the back of them, or they get covered up in armor and such. But I think much like object-oriented programming, I think custom characters are something that game developers thought was a good idea and got all on board with and over-promoted it when the vast majority of gamers really didn't care. that much, and I still don't care. Like, in general, I want somebody that's that looks either interesting as a character and storyline as a character makes sense. I don't need a male Lara Croft, for instance, because Lara Croft is a character, and I'm fine as playing as her. In fact, I think even in his separate game, Nathan Drake still is kind of a pathetic clone of Lara Croft, having not played Uncharted. Maybe if I actually played Uncharted, at some point I'll change my opinion there. But if it is just kind of a generic character, if it's just Steve from Minecraft, for instance, then the Alexa and Steve, I think that's her name, or Alex and Steve, work fairly well to have a male and female version. Arguably in Minecraft there needs to be a lot more base default skins, even though you can make your own custom skins. But I think that's pretty much it. I'd much prefer an artist to make one good-looking masculine character, one good-looking feminine character, and call it a day. And I would be perfectly fine if the feminine character is actually a male, and the masculine character is actually a biological female, or if they're both asexual or androgynous or hermaphrodites or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. I just think an outward muscly appearance, traditional masculine appearance, is what most people want to see on top of a traditional feminine appearance. It's what most people want to see. And that's not the full list by any means. There almost certainly are dozens of different body types you could have as a base, but the more you make the character artist work on that, the less likely any character is going to specifically look good. I don't think the God of War character actually looks good as a character, but he's recognizable, and if there was two God of War characters, a male and a female version of it, that would probably just make him look even worse, or make them both look even worse.
I'm the most fabulous demon of them out of the way! I'll be back for round 2.
Should I involve this? Let's see, moving on, we have a game called Together in My Headers, which seems like it's some kind of weird VR game with these giant heads with legs. Puzzle game. It says early access requires VR, $14.99. I'm gonna say no to that. We have a game called Tiny Tank, which looks like nothing. English, free to play. I'm gonna say no to that. Here we have a game called Jingor Sudoku, which looks like a different kind of Sudoku game. It doesn't look very visually polished. It's $1.99, English and Chinese. I'll give it a follow just in case people really like it, but I suspect the truth is nobody will. But it never gets reviewed at all.
Scatter like the blossom.
Yep, I'm overslept, so I'm starting to get sleepy again. Yeah, I really yesterday had a situation where I was sleeping so much that I was awake all night And so now I'm sleepy again.
I'll head the vanguard.
Let's see. Here we have a game on Steam called Aurora the Bunny, which I guess that's Oro the Bunny, which looks like it's just a platformer. $1.19 English only, nothing there of interest. YouTube advertiser put out this thing about gaming in particular. YouTube has 2 billion plus viewers in 100 plus countries. I don't know if there's really anything there. 5 things to know about YouTube's 2021 top 10 lists. Which, do you need a top 5 list? They're saying gaming content has continued to grow for storytelling and community, which you have like an hour and 30 minutes here of this video that they're linking to. It's just somebody's YouTube video playing as a Minecraft character. For
the world I love, I'll become a beast.
A flash of metal, a silent night.
There is no love amongst these beasts.
Didn't play fast enough. They're talking about like Minecraft. Live streams gave audiences a chance to connect with creators and each other during cultural moments.
Or your tears.
I don't know what those cultural moments would have been.
There's nothing to fear.
NASA Perseverance rover landing on
It won't
Mars.
be long now.
So they're talking about events in general that I guess live streamers talked about.
Like the moon.
But I don't think that even has anything to do actually with gaming. Audience demand spurs unexpected sequels. Podcasts broke through in a new way. Yeah, I think a lot of that is just generic. We made a top 10 list because it's the end of the year and we had nothing better to do. What's with this page? It stopped scrolling too. Well, that tab apparently crashed.
To
So,
arms!
you want to talk about how bad YouTube's own websites are?
My sins define
Can't even look at their propaganda without crashing. New Gran Turismo 7 PS5 gameplay video shows off a deep forest raceway. If that interests you, this is from Video Games Chronicles. And then there was this: gamers uploaded more than 250 million videos and dominating trending and top creator lists. Interesting. So that more may highlight that gamers are by de facto becoming the focused content creators. Hopefully that means YouTube will start treating video game creators better. This list is pretty much just recontextualizing what the other page said, though. It's not saying anything more. It would be nice if YouTube treated its
my prayers fall upon them.
content creators a lot better. But they don't, and I don't really expect them to.
General, we destroyed them!
On top of that, as a video game content creator myself, I don't know if I believe that just because more people are making more gaming content, that's actually a good thing for me. If anything, it may very well be a bad thing for me because it's just more competition. It all heavily depends on the factors that they're not talking about. If the number of viewers, if the number of watch time has gone down or stayed the same this year, particularly in the middle of a pandemic, that is terrible for me as a content creator, because that means the slice of the pie as far as their audience share is smaller and being split up between more content creators. I want more eyes to see my content. I don't want more competition unless it brings more eyes. And generally I want the content to be good, and more does not mean good by any means. And my content may very well not fall into the category of good either. I went over to the competitor to YouTube, Odyssey, which is, I think, supposed to be a blockchain-based, like, video service. And, yeah, I have like 20 followers on it. And I set it up because it was automated, and it's kind of a good place to have a backup, but yeah, it is not gaining any audience at the moment. And I heavily suspect if there was a point where the viewers on YouTube decided to leave en masse and stop watching YouTube, which is a tough thing for people to choose to do, I bet they would go for a new service, not Odyssey. A completely new service that yeah, may succeed, may fail. But yeah, it probably would be nice if YouTube was not the YouTube that it is now. It needs some major changes in its leadership and how it does things. I think every content creator has made that abundantly clear. It's not even a case that they can't please them all. It's like, it's a case that YouTube doesn't please any of its content creators at all, or really even please its advertisers that it sells ads with, or really even please the biggest of content creators. Like, but yeah, it is also very tiresome to whine and moan about YouTube. So I try not to do too much of that.
The uncharted desert awaits. This town is good folk for breakfast.
March on!
I ain't dead yet. Hands up!
I'll see you in purgatory.
Let's see. Moving on, Gametsu says another Eden, the cat beyond time and space, X Chrono Cross crossover has been announced. Which, I feel like this Another Eden, the cat beyond time and space game was just barely announced. Or maybe this is the crossover that we heard about a while ago. Seems like you're really just getting Chrono Cross character skins. That's about all I would expect. That being said, the way these Chrono Cross skins are being animated and shown is kind of a great way for them to experiment on what a Chrono Cross remake might look like and how it would be animated. With these little chibi characters, arguably that would be kind of disappointing. I definitely do have this feeling from a Westerner who doesn't particularly care too much about Japanese RPGs. I definitely have a feeling that I would prefer them to remake every JRPG and remaster it a second time so that it is full 3D models and not these chibi characters, and that they're targeting PC console level and quality, not just something that would play on a cell phone or play on a Switch.
Let the immorality tour begin.
That's an example, by the way, of why you want every tab, if you can, in Chrome to run in its own thread, even if that is demanding on resources, possibly a little bit more than normal, because I did just have to straight up close that tab from YouTube.
Are you ready for true combat?
Moving on, Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown DLC Yakuza Series Collaboration Pack has been announced. Which, okay, sounds interesting, but as a skin pack, as interesting as any skin pack is. Gamatsu also has the Gran Turismo 7 Deep Forest Raceway gameplay, which, honestly, if we just look at a little bit of this, it doesn't seem like it's really that much different to be racing in a deep forest if you're on a track, and the vast majority of the up-close textures that you're going to see are going to be track and just the edges of road.
A challenge.
When you get closer to this point where you're seeing things different, then maybe the deep forest would have an effect a little bit more. The idea of going through tunnels and under overhangs is interesting, certainly. I noticed in some of the racing games I've played in the past, you do tend to see the same thing over and over again, but it often doesn't matter because you're just focusing on racing anyways.
Let's speed things up. Too slow.
See, Gamatsu also has Gran Turismo 7 Porsche Vision Gran Turismo's trailer, if you want to check that out. Skullgirls 2 Encore DLC character Black Dahlia has been announced. Umbrella launches in early 2022, which I don't know. I don't know if Umbrella, yeah, Umbrella here is a different character than Black Dahlia as far as characters. Yeah, the list of fighting games is going to be weird, certainly, that you're going to have to cover at least one of the Skullgirls game, if to say nothing more than the Skullgirls game is fairly weird, and yet somehow manages to do something interesting. In a lot of ways, Skullgirls is doing the exact thing I've always wanted to see done.
I need more fear, more terror.
Got a job to do.
Which is the idea of
My loyalty is ironclad. This is our last push. Harder armor, stronger armor.
I
Steel
think I'm
yourself.
gonna lose here.
My armor has been pierced.
I'm still gonna lose. Like, the idea of doing your own art style and just not trying to conform to the standards and the norms is exactly what I want to see in most games, and yet in the case of Skullgirls in a fighting game, it often gets punished and not rewarded like it probably should. And that's why you very often see the same generic archetypes and characters, Mortal Kombat in particular, doing the same 60% of characters over and over again. Street Fighter doing the same characters over and over again.
Sword deserves a pointed response.
Get out of my way!
Like there's not a good example, I think, out there like Borderlands is for first-person shooters or RPG games, where they did a different art style and were well received because of it. I don't think there's something like that in fighting games. The best you could make an argument for, I would say, is probably when you do a fighting game that is just all the female characters and you go a little bit more lewd on it. That's going in a different direction, at least.
Allow me to bestow
But even that's not
kiss.
a full 180 from a standard fighting game. Like Sakura from the Street Fighter series, for instance, is basically in Sailor Moon cosplay as her default outfit. And arguably most of the Street Fighter characters are in silly outfits, and that doesn't feel off or weird.
Melt under my touch.
Soul Calibur is another example of like Ivy basically in a kind of lewd outfit a lot of times, and that's fairly established as standard. I am adjusting my chair a lot today, so I'm probably feeling a little bit of discomfort. I can certainly say, yeah, I'm feeling some discomfort in my back still. And who knows if that ever heals.
Allow me to bestow
Tends to be a case that it doesn't ever heal.
Melt under my touch.
And so our pact is forged.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Parametric Creature Lab, which looks like nothing. Some kind of pattern generator, life simulator, I guess. A sandbox physics game of some sort. It does look a lot better than, what was that game, Agr.io. That being said, I don't know if there's really a game here. If anything, this looks like a software that is just trying to be sold as a game from some low-effort Chinese company. $3.19, English and Chinese. Here we have a game called Equinox, which just looks like a platformer with maybe a gimmick of some characters being constellations. But I don't know if that really matters. Yeah, it probably doesn't. It's free, English only. So I guess the price is right at the very least.
And so our pact is forged.
Allow me to bestow a crimson kiss. Melt under my touch. Melt under my touch. Melt under my touch.
You have summoned the blade of purgation here.
Let's see. Next, sorry I went quiet there. We have a game here called Sotano Mystery Escape Room Adventure, which looks like it's probably just an escape the room game. Kind of feels like it might be somewhat in the shape of the Resident Evil house in Resident Evil 1. But yeah, there's really no good reason to use the layout of that house for anything. It's a pretty bad layout for a house. $6.29 English only. That's going to be an easy no. Here we have a game called Chicken Z, which obviously is a top-down shooter of no real polish. $11.99 English only. Here we have a game called Wall to Wall, which looks like it is just maybe Pong. It's solid colors. That would be really ugly to look at. Very tiring on the eyes. $5.99. I mean, 59 cents English only. And then we have this developer, which we should just block this guy right now. Ignore this guy. Because he has Maze Art Red, Maze Art Purple, Maze Art Pink, all on the same day. Maze Art Orange. Like, so that was like 5 different variations of the exact same game.
I'm the most fabulous demon of them all. Out of the way! Out of the way! Out of the way!
Let's see. Gamatsu says Toho Scarlet Curiosity developer Onkake Spa announces Toho Choshinsei, which the number of people seemingly allowed to use the word Toho seems to be unlimited. But I guess we need to figure out what Toho Choshinsei, if I'm pronouncing that right, is. It looks like it might be a rotational fighting game of monsters. Still magical girls. Seems like it has a top-down hack and slash element too. It's kind of bullet hellish. Seems to have dungeons. I don't know if I would fully believe that there's enough polish in this game for it. It also looks like it might be a mobile phone game with a very big heads-up display all over the place. But yeah, it looks like there's an attempt to have a polished game here. This isn't just half-assing it. This. DNF Duel has a Ranger trailer too, so they really are just releasing a new trailer for a different character every day. It's probably run out of steam after a week or two. They can't have that many characters. Gamatsu has this week's Japanese game releases. So, Angry Alligator, Crisis Remastered Trilogy for the PS4, the Halo Infinite, Monopoly and Monopoly Madness for the Switch. Interesting. But I'll want to see if the review is good on that, because if it tends to be that Hasbro games kind of suck, but on the Switch it might be a different case. Monster Rancher 1-2 DX World's 25th anniversary, Sakuna of Rice and Ruin. Best Price seems to be a re-release. Rico London. Haven't heard of anything called Rico London. Street Fighter V Championship Edition All Characters Pack for the PS4. Some of these are re-bundles for sure. And Veils the Phantasm Soldier Collection, plus YouTuber's Life 2. And then there is a longer list of types of software only releases, non-physical. Nah, I don't want to play that.
I'm the most fabulous demon of them all. Out of the way! Out of the way! Out of the way! Why, you little...
Check out my fancy footwork.
Scatter like the blossom.
Time to dance for your life! Get ready to fly!
There we go. I think we can win that. Well, Play Asia doesn't seem to want to load these images. But I haven't had any other network problems. Not a single frame drop or a network issue. So that very possibly is just ad blockers stopping these images from loading.
May happiness be with you. You're finished!
This is a Play Asia listing, and I don't go to Play Asia that often. This may very well be the first time I've been to Play Asia. So there is a new Monopoly game for Switch coming out, and it doesn't seem to just be the regular Monopoly. Seems like it is. Maybe you got a different couple of gameplay mechanics.
I believe you slapped me!
You play Monopoly and Monopoly Madness. And I feel like the Monopoly Madness variant probably is just almost like a Mario Party action game.
Genuflect before darkness eternal.
Okay.
The truth lurks in the
You
dark.
little...
Let's go and play this one. Here we have a game on Steam called Hackers in Battlefield, which obviously looks like a low effort garbage game. $4.99, Japanese only. We can say no to that. Here we have Christmas with My Family, Jigsaw Puzzle, which we can fairly quickly say no to that. $1.19. Here we have Ping Pong Pufferfish, which I think we can also dismiss very easily. $3.39, bunch of languages.
And mine alone!
Here we have Waifu's Smash is the name of that, and that is quite the screenshot, although technically YouTube family friendly. It is an RPG Maker game with a lot of indication that there is going to be a lot of anime girls in states of lewd poses at the very least. It's tagged with sectional content nudity, and oddly says it has rhythm-based combat. It is $2.09. It supports English, Portuguese, Brazil, and Chinese. Let's see. There's a free uncensored DLC. The thing here, though, is it, like so many of these games, really does not feel like there's an actual game here. Let's see. I let the video play a little bit. Here we go. This will win.
Give in to your desires.
Like the moon on the water's surface.
Oh, I didn't realize I had only 2 health. Well, that sucked. I could have won if I'd paid better attention. I guess the anime waifu game. So it's a Crypt of the Necrodancer style gameplay.
To arms! There's a battle underway!
Mother,
And so,
Father,
yeah, I would say
come on.
at least 80% of this game is all going to just be Crypt of the Necrodancer, and then you get some live 2D sort of moving images of anime waifus here and there, but even the main protagonist as a character is drawn completely different and way worse than the waifus are, so it's like a completely different artist who made the game versus who put in the adult content. I don't get the idea there at a certain point. It would be the equivalent of a Hollywood production company getting like millions of dollars to make a theatrical movie release, and then at some point something going wrong and them saying, alright, this is now going to be a porno, and let's just shove in as much porno content as possible. Not even a case of them telling the actors that all of a sudden this is going to be a porno, but them just splicing in porno images from some other porn movie into the show, into the theatrical movie. I just don't see the logic behind that being a business model that makes any sense. I mean, it definitely was the way movies in the old VHS days used to be, is that at the very least the cover of the VHS made it look like it was a porno, and then the movie itself often turned out to not be one and turned out to be pretty awful. But in modern time, in the field of video games, it doesn't make sense.
Life and death.
And if you did want to just make a porno video game, why not just make a good porno video game? Not something that's going to make you play, in this instance, Crypt of the Necrodancer rhythm gameplay mechanics. Like, who is this fictional video gamer out there that only plays games with waifus and that?
Is that how you treat a lady?
Too slow.
I think it definitely stems from the idea that there were a bunch of old Asian businessmen in China, Korea, Japan in particular, who think, who know nothing about video games at all, and they just say sex sells, so put sex in the game. And nobody pushes back on that idea, and nobody tells them, actually, no, this doesn't work. Thousands upon thousands of people have tried that and failed fairly miserably. Like, sex sells sometimes, but the vast majority of the times it really doesn't.
Who will be my victim today? Are you worth your weight in gold?
Sing!
Ow! Is that how you treat a lady?
Too slow.
Ow!
Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Sub Chase Online, which looks like nothing. Here we have a game called There Is No Stairs, which looks like nothing. $1.99, Korean only. Here we have a game called Gunner Deadly Expedition, which looks like nothing. $7.79 English only. Here we have something called Opsium. It looks prettier as a kind of standard, probably asset flip horror game. I guess it's supposed to be a survival horror game. It still doesn't really look like a game worth playing, though. $15.99 English allegedly full audio. I think we have to say no to that.
Are you ready for true
Can
combat?
I haunt you too?
Shashing!
Let's see, hit this,
Is that how you treat a lady?
Things I do for fashion.
this,
Are you worth your weight
This.
in gold?
Don't just stand
Too
there,
slow.
fight!
hit this.
Don't just stand there, fight!
Oh man, if I had just killed one more person.
Pathetic!
If I had just killed one more of my guys, which probably would have been doable, I could have evolved this to win. We'll see. You gotta do 1 damage to me and that's it.
Enemy or no, you did good.
They pulled it off fairly easily. There definitely are times here where I'm close to winning, and if I just played better, I would win. Not to say this deck doesn't need some more tweaks and improvements, but it has a good starting point. Let's see. Gamatsu says BlazBlue Central Fiction for PC and BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle for PS4 and PC are going to add rollback netcode in 2022. I'm sure people that play BlazBlue will be very happy to hear that. I saw a review of the Nintendo Switch Nintendo 64 controller,
There's a
and
battle underway.
I put my
this
all into
YouTuber
every
compared
shot.
it to 2 other controllers that are somewhat similar to the Nintendo 64 controller and said that of the 3 options he covered, the Nintendo 64 controller was the best, but there's still major problems, particularly with the stick, the thumbstick of the Nintendo 64 controller, that were not really addressed when Nintendo made this new release.
Feeling hungry?
In particular, there were optical flywheels that read the position on the original Nintendo 64, which gave you a much lower chance of Joy-Con drift and compared to potentiometers, which is what's used now. And there's no such thing as a brushless potentiometer as far as I could see. Which that would be very useful if there was, for long-term usage, and that's just the general reason why there's Joy-Con drift in general, is the potentiometers. But then also it's plastic on plastic parts, just like the original Nintendo 64 controller, so very quickly the plastic on plastic parts are going to grind on each other, and the only thing you can really do is take the whole thing apart and grease it up, and there's not even a good source for replacement parts. So yeah,
I like. Give me that.
and that's the problem with the Nintendo 64 in general, is that there's even when you were playing the original Nintendo 64 with the original controllers, the layout of that controller was very different for very different games, and that controller worked well for some games and very poorly for other games, and there's just no good translation to it. At a certain point, I don't think kids in particular, or anybody, should care about playing Nintendo 64 or Mario 64 or any Nintendo 64 game with a Nintendo 64 controller. Instead, they should just remap the controls, remake the engine, just remake the whole game to make sense with modern controllers and modern layouts. It wouldn't be that hard. And in emulation, you do just have to map the buttons differently. Arguably, if these emulated games on the Switch just had better button mapping features, there would have been no desire at all to go back to the Nintendo 64 controller. Moving on, Gamatsu says Guilty Gear Strive DLC character Bacon has been announced. I guess that's Bacon? B-A... Yeah, I guess Bacon might be the better way. I doubt it's really Bacon. And Guilty Gear Strive is yet another one of these games that makes it really hard to justify going back and trying to like fight. Play Street Fighter 2. There's no actual gameplay footage, it's just a teaser trailer.
I like. Give me that.
I shall clear us a path.
Let's see. A early development video for Eco has been released for the 20th anniversary, which arguably is really just rubbing salt in the wound that the series of Eco has been just poorly mishandled and delayed and upon delayed. Like they really haven't promised anything more as far as the Eco series anyways, but like the remaster didn't really satisfy a lot of people, and it was a lot more colorful in this early video, I suppose. The sequels also not really doing anything for people. It's kind of, Eco is kind of a great example of a series of games that Sony should have had more teams on, put more funding behind, so that it actually got released fairly consistently as a series. Maybe it would have burnt itself out and people wouldn't really care about Eco, but the series that did burn themselves out, like Mortal Kombat, is kind of a great example. There's been 10 Mortal Kombats. People are fairly burned out of Mortal Kombat, but I guarantee you Mortal Kombat's made way more money than Eco has. So as a business decision, if there was an Eco 2, 3, 4, 5, one coming out every 4 years, even if they weren't particularly good, that'd probably be better. And comparing it to Mortal Kombat is probably an unfair comparison. It would be better to compare it to something like Fatal Frame, where Fatal Frame in particular has been going on and not been particularly good in quality or reception, has still managed to make a series out of itself and continue to sell. Moving on, Sega has trademarked Sonic Frontiers in Japan, and Square Enix has trademarked Diofield Chronicle, The Beast of Burden, and more. It's weird to have these pictures that are just text, certainly. A Switch game called Even If Tempest has an opening movie, which is a young maiden visual novel, an otome visual novel. I heard of an anime that's coming out this winter season based off of one of the Shakespeare plays, but I don't think it was Tempest. That doesn't mean anything though, because this could be a visual novel based off Tempest that had an anime previously, or didn't have an anime at all. Or just gonna have nothing to do with Tempest as in the Shakespearean play.
Let's play.
These kind of trailers don't really tell you much. It could be good, could be bad. Could be mediocre. Here we have a game on Steam called Endless Match, which is obviously just a match 3 game. $11.99, English only, nothing there of interest. Here we have a game called X-Virus, which just is an asset flip first person shooter. $169, English and Chinese. And I can see the beginning of the end now.
I need more fear, more terror.
Got a job to do.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
My loyalty is ironclad.
And then
March on! Harder armor, stronger armor. Steel yourself.
do we want to kill this?
Cretin.
You little.
Here we have a game called The Undisputables online multiplayer shooter, which looks like a cell phone game port. Doesn't look particularly interesting. $16.99, English, allegedly full audio. Here we have a game called Valkyrie Profile Nifi Ni, which looks like it's just an RPG maker game of no interest. 99 cents, Chinese only. Here we have a game called Super Clown Lost Diamonds, which I don't think is an actual game. Seems like you're playing as a Mario-like character, running around collecting coins, not diamonds. Very rarely, I don't think I've ever actually seen a successful open-world 3D game where you jumped on enemies on PC. That is a thought, certainly. But yeah, you can pretty well tell that this is somewhat low effort as a game. $1.19, English only. Here we have a game called Beaver, which looks like some kind of weird VR game. I don't know how it actually plays though. That's my question.
Remember, every drop 100 droplets in a single stroke.
Seems like you've got a bunch of shapes, and then you're shooting sections to create or break connections with different shapes. But I have no idea if there's really a game here. And this trailer is weird because you have this white-haired girl in this very unique outfit, to say the least, dancing around. And pretty much anytime you see this, it kind of highlights that you're not really showing a lot of gameplay. I'll give this a follow just to see some reviews on it. It's a VR game, so it would never get off the follow list anyways. Here we have a game that's just Asian characters, just looks like a generic RPG game. 99 cents, Chinese only. Here we have a game called Hover the Edge, which looks like nothing of interest. I guess we're going to probably end somewhat early today, which I'll appreciate that, certainly, instead of going 3.5 hours, because we really only have about 10 more games to look at. Here we have a game called Mondrian Squares, which doesn't look like anything I would be interested in. $2.54, English only. We have Super Yodel Land, Legend of the Katzenbar. I feel like I've seen other Super Yodel Land games. Damn. Almost feels like it's a Getting Over It with Benet Foddy clone. We're just trying to get higher and higher. $13.99, English only, third-party EULA. See if this developer has made any other games.
Enemy or no, you did good.
Alright, I'll be generous and put this on the follow list. I'm not doing particularly well as far as getting the daily quest done, but I've long since given up on that as far as Shadowverse. Let's see. Gamatsu has Atelier Sophia, or Sophie 2, The Alchemist of Mysterious Dream, Alette Clarity trailer. So it's another character trailer.
There's a battle underway.
The thing with me is that the Atelier series pretty much has already sold me, so I don't really need to see anything more. And that's just because, not because of cleavage or anything like that. I mean, just the Atelier series, at least one of those games I really do want to play, and I'm not anywhere close to thinking I would want to play Atelier Sophie 2 without playing Atelier Sophie 1, and I don't think I'd want to play Atelier Sophie before playing, I believe it was Atelier Ryza, the really popular Atelier game, or whatever it was called.
I've got this under control.
Let's see. The Idolmaster Starlight Season DLC character Kaede Takagaki launches December 9th. Which, okay. This being a J-pop group. Idolmaster characters. Like, I don't know if that really impresses me that much. It does feel like this Idolmaster game may have a little bit more going to it than just the standard rhythm gameplay elements, but I suspect not much more than that. Let's see, Horizon Forbidden West has another developer blog for combat and enemies. Really don't know if you need to once again see another developer blog. They're trying to build up hype on the game, and I can't blame them. But they kind of oddly are not building up hype around the story, which they've been fairly quiet about, or any gameplay mechanics, which would be new. So it feels like it might very well be a lot of the same as the first game. But the first game was good, so should be alright. This one.
Return light to the canal.
At your service.
Let's see. Gamatsu says The Matrix Awakens, an Unreal Engine 5 experience for PS5 and Xbox Series pre-download is now available. The experience will be revealed at the Game Awards 2021. I've seen some more trailers for the actual Matrix Awakens movie, and yeah, everything I see really just make me feel like Keanu Reeves should have been forced to cut his hair like it was before, because he looks way too much like his character in John Wick now. Or they should have just recast, and I think there's a great argument that they should recast. I wouldn't be surprised if he does kind of end up being killed.
He's feeling hungry.
But it would be weird for Neo to be killed in The Matrix Awakens for a new character to take over. Even by the title, you pretty much know that
you carry out your mission.
The Matrix Awakens probably involves everybody waking up from the Matrix and doing something different.
Wait! Is it over already?
Something very much not really related to the Matrix.
Are you ready for true combat, Pop?
Okay.
March on!
See how this works.
I'm over here! I like
One,
No one gets past
2,
Just stand
Today we
3,
Just Stand pathetic.
9. Let's see. PlayStation Now adds Celeste, Final Fantasy X, 10-2, HD Remastered, Grand Theft Auto 3, the Definitive Edition, and John Wick Hex, and Spitlings in December. I don't know what Spitlings is as a game. And they desperately need a better picture for Grand Theft Auto 3. That character is drawn pretty terribly. I wouldn't be opposed to them redrawing covers for certain games and going back to the old ways where it was just straight up lies as far as what was depicted on the cover of games. Let's do this.
I shall clear us a path.
One step closer to victory. A second wind got to roam in style. Impossible.
And then pretty much I have only one GameDeveloper.com article at all. There's a report.
Setting reflectors to reflect.
The Activision Blizzard is laying off QA workers at Raven Software. The update here is employees had reportedly been told that the company was going to improve their wages. Quote, eliminating doesn't count as improving. Well, it probably improves it for the management quite finely. I think in a lot of ways this is maybe GameDeveloper.com piling on Activision Blizzard a little bit more than is sadly reasonable to pile on, because it's frankly not uncommon for video game companies to lay off QA people. I mean, it just isn't. And
who will be my victim today?
That's all that it seems like is really happening here, is that they are just laying off a fairly small number of QA people on top of that.
This town is good
I think it
luck
was
for
like
breakfast.
20 people.
Hands up.
Impossible.
Yeah, the update here is Activision Blizzard spokesman says here,
Destroy the world.
we're growing, we're converting approximately 500 temporary workers to full-time employees, which arguably means they decided to fire 20 people who were really bad. Which that's really disingenuous. I could totally see a manager going, all right, we have 520 employees. We want to make them all full-time employees, but I can list off the top of my head 20 employees that are so bad we don't want to turn into full-time employees, so we're going to not extend their contract. That's not even laying them off. That's just their contract coming to an end. They kind of know, even though I fully admit and agree that it's not fair that anybody can be employed temporarily or on a contract that runs out and isn't just automatically renewed. And I'll agree with that idea, certainly. This seems like very standard business. Like, you would see very similar actions and ways of doing business
Are you ready for true combat?
in any field, in any corporation. There's always going to be people that are not worth potentially keeping in the long haul in that position. And even if you are just looking at the cold hard numbers, yeah, it is mathematically worth it to fire 20 people to then give full-time employment to 500 people. It's totally worth it for society in general. It would be arguably worth it to fire 499 people to give full-time employment to 500 people, because that would be the shift, is that you've got a bunch of temporary employees that are supposed to be working less than 40 hours. Technically, I think in most mines, closer to 20 hours. And so if you're going to get them to 40 hours or more, then you, 40 hours a week, you could get rid of half of them and then shift that workload to the now full-time employees. And that still feels like that would be worth it. Even if it was you fired 500 people to give full-time employment to 500 people, that's still mathematically sound. It's articles like that when you don't wait for a comment, when you just rush to publish and get something out there, like GameDeveloper.com did. That's where you lose your credibility. That's where you sound like a pearl clutching, biased source. There's just sensationalist journalism. It makes the author of that article sound like they've never worked in a business, not even run a business or been a manager, that they've just never worked in a real business in their life. And that they can't do math, just basic math. And sure, if this was, if you were going to tell me GameDeveloper.com was just straight up a socialist or communist propaganda news source, and that they are just pushing for like communist style full employment whether you want it or not, then okay, I guess I would see your point there. But they should be more outward if that is their perspective, which I don't think it really is. I think they just are looking for sensationalist journalism and clicks, and
He's feeling hungry.
are kind of ridiculous about it. Once again, the idea of universal basic income really should be accepted and pushed by everyone. But in the case of being a QA worker for a video game, it would make so much more sense to be that kind of job. If UBI existed, I could see myself dipping my toe into that field, like just being a video game debugger. I'm certainly qualified, or at least I think I'm qualified to do that job. I almost certainly am. But I would never do it if I had to do the level of hours that they tend to want QA people to work, with the level of pay that they tend to give QA workers. But if those were no longer issues, where they could offer less hours without having to pay overtime because of UBI, which that might very well be the trade-off, is that they implement UBI and then overtime requirements get changed in a balancing act, as far as federal overtime hours. Or just a whole bunch more people would become QA testers, so then they wouldn't need to give it, or they wouldn't have any real reason to give extra hours to people. QA in particular would make a lot more sense if instead of them having 500 full-time QA workers, if they could pay 1,000 people a lot less to QA test their game, they'd get a lot more varied feedback, and that might help them as far as QA goes. Although, also, I think QA would very quickly be realized as the burger flipping style job it is, that most people don't actually want to do, and not for very long at least. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Fast Fruit, which looks like nothing. I guess it's supposed to be a Pac-Man clone. Sorta. $3.99 English only.
A show of bones is a show.
Here we have a game called Sin Bearer's Tactics, which I think is probably an asset flip game. Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of polish in any of those screenshots. As a positional placement RPG game. $9.99 English and French. Here we have a game called Stellar Monarch, which looks like nothing. No, I really should have done a Lego over the weekend, come to think of it. They just announced yet another expert building set. Stellar Monarch 2 is $22.49 English, allegedly full audio. That's definitely a no. We have Dual Art Drawing Game, which doesn't seem like the images want to go forward. Yeah, I don't think there's anything here of interest. $8.99. Can we win here? Yeah, we once again just gonna fail.
I bring you the stars to make a wish come true. A star for you too. Is that how you treat a lady?
I like. Give me that.
Here we have a game called Rusky's A Boozy Beginning, which looks like garbage. It's probably just a troll game, joke game. Free to play, English only.
Why am I seeing
Here we have
stars?
Sports Betting Simulator, which obviously is just a low effort simulation game. 99 cents, English only. Here we have a game called Modest Eyes, which is tagged not safe for work. Looks like it's just an RPG, a jigsaw puzzle game with some anime girl pictures. It's $1.19, whole bunch of languages. And while it's tagged as not safe for work, at the current moment it's just girls in their underwear, and they say an 18 plus patch is coming soon. I would not believe that in any game whatsoever. If there was going to be an 18 plus patch, you would have that available on day one. Okay. This
Uncharted desert awaits.
and this.
This town eats good folk for breakfast.
And this.
Hands up!
I ain't throwing in the towel yet.
March on!
I'm ready for more. What do we have here?
Here we have a game called Ion Axia, AXXIA. Looks like it's just a low effort space game. Yeah, nothing I would be concerned with. $7.99 is fairly expensive also. English
Best of luck to
only.
you.
Here we have a game called Paths in Danger. There might be something to this.
I'm coming for you.
It looks different at the very least. It's early access, $15.19. English allegedly full on. I'll put this on the fall list and see if people review it. We have a game called Kara Legends, which definitely doesn't look like anything. Yeah. Early access $7.99, English only. We have a game called Udogene X, which looks like it's a platformer shooter Toho game of no real interest. $5.59, English, Japanese, and Chinese. I'm gonna say no to that.
I need more fear, more terror.
Got a job to do.
1, 2, 3.
My loyalty is ironclad. One step closer to victory. Harder armor, steel yourself.
Die.
My loyalty
Let's see
is
if we can win.
ironclad.
Maybe we can win here. Yeah, we have a game on Steam called Underwater World, which just looks like a platformer of no interest. 59 cents, English only. Really not seeing anything here. Here we have something called Ephesus, which is apparently a exploration survival game in ancient Greek times.
Enemy or no, you did good.
It's early access, $9.87, English only. Is there something here that would really interest me? Though, I kind of think like, no. The general idea would make some sense. It apparently also has online co-op for some reason. Being in ancient times and surviving around a narrative would be the thing that I'd really need to see. Yeah, if I could just get one disconnect, that would be great, and just ignore the 2 ranked wins. That being said, I don't think I'm likely to have that happen. We may stop getting the quick disconnects altogether now that I've reset my router settings. Like, there may just have been a bug in the settings that was getting copied over and over from backups to restores.
To arms! There's a battle underway!
Or it could just be that WMM as an part of Wi-Fi, when misconfigured, also misconfigures connections outside of the Wi-Fi ports. That'd be weird, but it's not insanely unbelievable. Here we have a game on Steam called One Escape, which looks like nothing, just a platformer. $3.99, whole bunch of languages. What's funny is they're labeling it as a precision platformer, but I don't know if I would really call it that. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't think I'd quite call this a precision platformer. But whatever. Still doesn't look like a good game. Here we have a game called Icarus, which is already mixed, so I think we can say no to that. Which is a shame, because it kind of looks interesting. Let's see, single player, online co-op, whole bunch of languages. Let me just reload the page and see if the reviews have improved any. If it did, it barely improved. It's not labeled as early access or anything like that, so I'm gonna have to say no to that. Here we have a game called Togu Racers, which looks mediocre at best. It's a racing game, $14.99, English and Japanese. Here we have a game called Six Souls, which maybe I could be really generous and say yes to this, put it on the follow list. I'd probably not want to play something like this. It's $3.99, several languages, but I'll put it on the fall list anyways. Here we have Eliza Dragon Hunter, just tagged as a Souls-like. I assume this is probably an asset flip game, but it does seem like it has some polish to it. Although, in a lot of ways, I guess I am getting blinded by the dress-up elements and different outfits and armor and different screenshots. I heavily suspect this is not really a game. Yeah, what on this can make me think that there's a game worth playing here? I don't think there is enough here. Arguably, even in Dark Souls, there isn't much of a game there. It's just enemies that you have to run and defeat. 74 cents is too cheap. That's the nail in the coffin for me. Is that if this was going to be a good game, it would it would not be that cheap. English only is the languages. Here we have a game called Bounceables, which looks like nothing I'd be interested in. Free to play, English only. Here we have something called The Captain, which looks like a point-and-click adventure of the sorts, and I am a sucker for point-and-click adventure games. Although it also seems like it's somewhat of a strategy simulation games, running a spaceship. Alright, I'll give that a follow. $19.99 is fairly expensive. Several languages. But yeah. See, next we have Street Outlaws 2, Winner Takes All. Which, yeah, I don't think there's a game here. There's not a lot of racetracks that I'm seeing here. And I thought we'd end early, but really at this rate we're going to end up at 3.5 hours as normal. I'll give this a follow, just out of an abundance of caution. $39.99, English allegedly full audio. We have 2 more games. We have Happy Humble Burger Farm, which looks like it is a really weird looking horror game. That doesn't mean though it's bad, particularly when we see that it's been rated very positively. $17.99, single player only, English allegedly full audio. I suspect it probably does make some sound effects. This very possibly is a game that some YouTuber has covered, and for its weirdness, that's why it's gotten so many positive reviews. But since I don't know that for a fact, I have to just take it on face value that since it's rated positively, it deserves a follow at least. Then here we have a game called Arbor Real, as an arborist, I guess. It does look like it's several mini games around the idea of growing plants and trees. And there might be something to that idea. Enough that I think it deserves a follow. $7.99, English and French. And with that, I am done with everything I had open. So I'll just go through my tabs real quickly and see what new things have happened that we can talk about on Wednesday. Shadow Tactics Blades of the Shogun's Aiko's Choice apparently came out. And honestly, that may be about it. Like, according to what's on Steam, either no games have come out in the last 2 hours, or the what's on Steam is just bugged, or Twitter is bugged. Let's see. Now looking at GameDeveloper.com's thing, and I guess I have to play an arena run too, off screen. That's really the only thing that would make sense, because I'm not going to stream it. Yeah, nothing new from GameDeveloper.com either. Let's look at Gematsu. Literally one news story from Gematsu over the past 3 hours. Let's look at Video Games Chronicles. Literally nothing. Well, maybe these news things are slightly out of order too. Right, then one more tab. Let's just see if there were any other new tweets worth mentioning. I almost feel like I should just start wrapping up now. Yeah, I'm wondering if I should even mention G4's reviews. Like, they gave Halo Infinite a 4 out of 5. I guess that's what they're tweeting. Which I guess they're still doing the out of 5 scale. Which it would make a lot of sense not to change it, since X-Play has had the out of 5 scale the whole time. But it is very questionable whether I care, particularly nowadays, about what is effectively still a mainstream video game journalist site, how they feel about video games. Particularly when you talk about like Adam Sessler having a hand on whether he likes video games or not. I'm not sure if I really respect Adam Sessler's opinion anymore, or ever should have. Like, for the most part, I'm trying not to listen to reviews of video games from mainstream video game journalists, and only listen to reviews from smaller sources that I feel like I can potentially trust a little bit better if I get to know that individual person, instead of, say, X-Play, which may have 4 or 5 different people playing the games and giving reviews and writing reviews for Adam Sessler to spout out as if he was personally making a review. Although I think he does make some of the reviews. I'm fairly certain he doesn't make all of them. Okay, so the only thing we have left to talk about then was Call of Duty Warzone developers are staging a walkout today over job cuts. So 12 members of the Ravens QA team will let go on Friday. So you're going to have a walkout over 20 people. Fair enough. If you want to support those 20 people and you don't think it's fair, that's fine. There was a meme image showing how like 700 people in France were going to have their pay cut, and because of unions striking in solidarity with those 700 people, it ended up with like 50,000 people going on strike and 2 politicians straight up being fired or removed from office because of such a bad decision. Particularly in that case, just telling people straight up, we're going to cut your salary, is never an acceptable response. I would much prefer you people fire the people than cut their salary, because that's just unfair bullying at a certain level. And you are effectively firing somebody if you cut their salary. But in the United States, you can get away with cutting someone's salary a little bit. But if you make significant changes to the type of work they do or the amount of compensation for the work they do, then you are effectively firing them, and you do still qualify for unemployment, whatever little amount of unemployment you might get. And then the only other story here is Embark Studios has announced a game called Arc Raiders with this really blurry image. And that's it. So that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. My eyes don't hurt. I do recognize that, so I think I am on the road to recovery. I haven't had anything eye-related happen today after 3 hours, nearly exactly 3 hours of streaming. If you want to follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching.